Now, in your second novel, David Sunshine, your main character, T.J. Brinkman, is actually your alter ego, and it's about what he goes through as an idealist trying to make his fortune in New York. Now, here's my question. This novel was originally going to be published 40 years ago, so why wasn't it? And today, why do you say David Sunshine should be looked at as an historical novel?
Well, it's what you just said is absolutely right. The book was written shortly after the events that it describes. It was it's a novel, and it's and the purpose of it is to be a funny novel. I think I was really thinking in some way of Mark Twain, somebody or Dickens, someone who could give you characters that were either scary or funny but very big characters, and it does reflect a time when things were much more how should I say, much more open in the world of TV, and it's about a young man whose first job out of college is working for this fellow named David Sunshine, who is supposed to be a wonderful producer and the great hope of TV as the sort of golden age of television is coming to a close and TV is becoming more and more commercial. And so initially, I wrote this book, and it was very clear to everybody that there were genuine people. I mean, there were real living, possibly litigating people that this book was about, and it was not very carefully cloaked or disguised. And one publisher bought the book, that is, gave me a contract, and in those days it was a princely advance, and then backed out. And that didn't worry me much, because I thought, well, if one publisher will take it, another will. And then I began to find that others wouldn't. And one said particularly that they were very afraid that this would lead to a lawsuit. But I think most of the people who rejected the book, recognized who the characters were, said nice things about the book itself, but just didn't want to go against the current belief, the sort of general belief. This guy was profiled in the New Yorker, and he was on the front page of the New York Times, and he must be what he said he was, and he shouldn't be laughed at. And so anyway, the book had to go back in the drawer, and then a few months ago, not very long ago, I unearthed it. I looked at it and said, this is pretty good. Now it's no longer a dangerous book, because all the people that it's about are long gone. But let's publish this. This because it does tell the story of what the '60s were really like in the wonderful world of television. So I guess
I'm glad you did.
It was contemporary. It was contemporary, almost an expose. Although it wasn't full of kiss and tell stuff, but it was just full of making fun of people. So it was an expose when it was written, and then decades went by, and then now it's historical. That's how it's how it used to be.
And I got to say, of course, that David Sunshine really was, your character really was David Susskind, whom I watched the things that he produced, and he was a media darling. And what fascinated me was when the so-called legendary giant, David Susskind, was interviewing your young character for a position. I couldn't believe that he admitted to the person he was interviewing that he was a con artist. And was that crazy that he said that?
Yeah. It was the thing was, in those days, this was before there was such a thing as PBS. PBS was sort of what was called educational television in those days. There were little pockets of that, but the actual organization was just beginning to be, was kind of a gleam in people's eye. and and uh, and so there was, we all looked towards a very small handful of people who could make television good, because television was increasingly, with every decade, people always complain that television gets worse, and this was happening, and this guy was out there saying, yes, I'm the future. I'm going to make television good. I'm going to. And I'm going to produce shows with Laurence Olivier and Ingrid Bergman, and I'm going to do Chekhov, and I'm going to do all these great things. And he did some of that, in point of fact. But then, yes, the young hero, who is innocent as can be, I mean, just thinks he's bought it all. I mean, he's read all the stories, and he thinks this guy is great. And he walks into the office for the interview, and the first thing this guy says to him is, "It's all con. I'm a con man. I've got a certain kind of con. My producer has a certain kind of con. You'll have to learn how to con people." And this is an amazing. In fact, that's one of the things, I guess, that in part made it an expose, was that he actually said that. I mean, the first half of the book, which deals primarily with the relationship of the hero with this sort of tyrannical con man who's pretending to be something he isn't. It is, the dialogue in that is word for word exactly what happened, and I've been dining out on those stories for 40 years.
Wow. Now, Morrow, when it comes to con men, is it fair to say there are even more today with all these so-called TV reality shows? It seems anything for a buck or ratings goes today.
Don't you think? I mean, it seems pretty obvious. Yeah, it's very worrisome, isn't it? Because
it is.
We've got children growing up with this as their literature. I mean, there's always a background, Carole. When I was a kid, it was radio and comic books, and people were very much against that if they were, but that's nothing compared to, I mean, we passed through the Leave It to Beaver stage, and now we're into, a decade of reality TV, which of course isn't reality at all. It's just, fake, awful television, and we're into a cult of people who are famous for being famous. Who what in the world do the Kardashians do, except whatever they feel like doing, and then that gets filmed, and then she or they and similar people are made into stars.
I wanted to talk a little bit about your book because, as I said, it's been called all kinds of things: adventure, romance, social commentary, and as you said, it's also funny. And talking about laughter, I thought your young character TJ's encounter with a 60s thermofax machine was hilarious. It certainly wasn't pretty. Was it fun to write what happened to that delicate machine? Wow.
Yes, well, that's the thing. I mean, and that really did happen. There's a thing called the thermofax.
It did.
I wasn't even sure how to. I mean, I'm just glad I spelled it then, because I you couldn't find it nowadays. And you put in a couple of sort of what felt like damp pages the size of a piece of paper, and in the case of TJ, he does this, and he pushes all the right buttons. He's done this many times before, and suddenly this thing that is completely metal catches on fire, begins to smoke at first, smoke, and then more and more smoke comes out of it, and eventually it bursts into flame, and he of course doesn't know what to do. He's taken aback by it, and the producer, who clearly is not altogether on his side, and who kind of likes to get him, with small things, and anything he does that could possibly be criticized, she will criticize. And she comes by, and there's this blazing machine, and she says to him, you have to be very careful with that. That's a delicate machine.
Well, you and TJ survived that. Now, your book also has a very serious side, and your alter ego, TJ, faces all kinds of rejection in the TV world he wants to be in, including being fired by the despicable David Sunshine. I certainly hope you had an easier time when you started your career.
Well, I think that was how I started it. I mean, in the sense that in a way, everyone who got all us young folks in those days who got into television really would probably work for David, or would work for a guy named Alan Funt, who ran a show called Candid Camera. And Alan Funt was also famed for being a dictator, but he made no pretense of being the great hope of television of the future. But he was a very, very hard guy to work for. And I also had, and after my experience with Susskind, I remember I had an interview with him, and he made an offer, and I could just see it happening all over again. And I said, no, I'm going somewhere else. And
I've had enough.
And so that's what I did.
Now, for all the fans of your late wife, Rue McClane, and I certainly was one of them, what are a couple of things about her that you most loved and made her so special?
Well, that's there. First of all, I mean, she was. It's very, it's a very rare thing, and this is going to sound awful, but just hear me out. It's very rare to find people with a really strong sense of humor. It's rare to find a woman with a strong sense of humor, and it's rare to find a beautiful woman with a strong sense of humor, and then to find a great actress who's a beautiful woman and has a great sense of humor. It's just, I mean, that's something that comes along about once in a lifetime, right? And that was Rue. I mean, she was, what you saw was what you got. She was an extraordinarily funny gal to be around. She was smart as could be, very flat-footed. I mean, she'd just say what it was that she wanted to say. And she was a great, by the way, I should tell you, she was a great supporter of my writing, sort of behind my back. And I didn't know this, but at one point there was an interview with Rue, and they said, what's your favorite book? And she named a book that I was in the process of writing. I mean, I hadn't even finished it, and she said that was. But there was another side to her too, which is she could be ever so slightly absent-minded at times, and a terrible sense of direction. And I've told this story before, but I remember she showed up one time, as she usually did, late, and she said, I bet you were wondering where I was. And I said, what? And she said, I just bet you were wondering where the hell I was. And I said, yes, I was wondering that. She said, well, so was I.
That's a great, great story. And she loved clothes so much, which I never knew, that she got all the beautiful clothes that she wore on the Golden Girls. She was able to take them home.
That was her great business coup, that she got in her contract. She got them to give her all the costumes that Blanche wore, and Blanche was the only one of the four Golden Girls who had her own designer. I mean, everybody else, they had a wardrobe, costume people, but there was actually a designer who designed Blanche's outfits, and she would have as many as 5 changes per episode. So this was a ton of clothing, and she got it all. That was and it was interesting to me that her style really didn't alter. The way that she dressed stayed the same. These clothes stayed timely, and give or take a shoulder pad or two. She really dressed the same way for many years, and it became her own unique style of dress. Always very bright colors. Always very cheerful, very up.
Certainly, and she was beautiful, and her clothes were beautiful. Now, Finally, I want to ask you about the next novel that you're working on, because I'm sure you are.
Oh, well, that's very kind of you. Yeah, I am indeed, and this is a novel. Well, by the way, which I think in some way Rue influences, because it's a story of it's the story of a mother who wakes up one morning and discovers that her teenage daughter has gone, and she hasn't been abducted. She's gone. She's left of her own free will, leaving no information with anybody as to where she is, and the mother then sets out to find her, and that's essentially the novel. It's called Persephone, and it's as the work I do tends to be. It's based on really a myth. David Sunshine is based on a myth. After all, it's based on the myth of the goes back to ancient Greek times of the innocent boy who comes to this big city and what happens to him. Well, this upcoming book is based on the myth of Persephone, which is in fact the title of the book. And what the daughter has done is, without telling anybody, she has gone off and become a fashion model, and her professional name is Persephone, and she's a great success. And it's very reminiscent of actually how Rue began her career.
Wow.
I don't mean that she ran away.
No, but that's where she was a model.
She kept it secret. She kept what she wanted to do secret from everybody. She came from a little town in Oklahoma, and she knew that if she told anybody that she wanted to be a movie star or a TV star, that they would just laugh at her. So she never told anyone that was her ambition, and she just set out to accomplish it, and in fact did so.